And this evening, friends, we come to this portion once again, 1 Samuel chapter 3. Last week, we considered the first 7 verses, and we considered the Lord calling his people, and we considered the various things which are demonstrated in that portion for our learning. This evening, we shall come to consider verses 8 to 10, where we read of the Lord coming to Samuel the 3rd time and the 4th time. Coming the 3rd time to him, and Eli, at that point in time, realizing and recognizing that the Lord was calling Samuel. This was nothing else other than the Lord speaking to this young man. And then he gives Samuel wise counsel, good counsel, now that he knows what the case is. And he sends him back to lie down and to sleep. And the Lord comes yet again and calls him, and he hears, he answers, and the Lord speaks to him. Well, let us firstly consider upon this matter concerning the Lord that his will must be done. His will must be done. There is nothing which can foil the Lord's will. There is nothing which can foil his plans from coming to pass, to stop them, to hinder them, to delay them, even by a second. It cannot be. It cannot happen. It is an impossibility. It is outright impossible. Yes, the Lord has come many times to Samuel, and he has not yet shown any sign of realizing who it was or what it was that was happening. But the Lord comes again, and there is purpose in this. There is his sovereign will in this. But he cannot be foiled. It cannot be that he comes and he calls Samuel 3, 4, 5 times and he does not respond. But there must be a response. There must be a change at some point, because the Lord will have his will to be done. He will not call just as an intent of just calling for the sake of calling, but there is always a purpose for calling. And if he has a purpose for calling, then he must make it known and he must have it done. And therefore, he must not be foiled. And in this we can see quite his sovereignty, how he was overseeing this whole portion of the scriptures from highest heaven. There was nothing unknown to him, and yet it was all for the good of Samuel. This delay, as it seems, that takes place here, this long wait which appears to occur, and sometimes it may be that the Lord will it to be thus. He will so desire that we should wait for an answer. He will so desire that we should wait to truly hear what he must say. And he will have us to wait sometimes in his will, in a state perhaps of some confusion, some uncertainty, some questioning. There must have been some confusion in this case. Samuel, convinced that he keeps on hearing someone calling him, and Eli every time denying it. And so it can be for us sometimes. We cannot see what we ought to be doing, where we ought to be going, how we ought to be serving. We can be in this state of confusion. Is the Lord calling me here? Is something else calling me? Is it the call of the flesh, the call of pride, calling you to some ambitious project? Is it the call of the world, calling you to some worldly pursuit? What is happening? What is happening here? Isn't this our experience sometimes? That we are in such a state, we do not know what is happening. We cannot work it out. We don't know what to do, perhaps. But we can be assured of this one thing. We will not be waiting for the Lord's commands one moment longer than he will have us to wait. You say, why? Why must I wait? Why is it that I must have this time of some confusion? Why is it that there must be this time for me when I know not what is happening? Friends, the Lord has a grand design in all things. We believe this. He has a purpose in everything. Therefore, it is no different in this case. It is the same. The Lord may have many purposes in such a case for an individual. His purposes will, to some extent, be tailored to every single person For every one of us was made, yes, in the image of God, and yet different. We each have our own unique personality. A unique stamp has been set upon us, and yet all bears the characteristics of God, at least before the fall, and since it bears yet still some resemblance. Well, why am I saying this? I say this because of the fact that the Lord, he has a plan for everyone. It is tailored individually, but overall, there will be some grand principles. As I have said, we have individual characteristics, yet we have one grand trait, which, although corrupted, still exists in man. And so there is some similarity between our experience, even though there is some difference. Grand principles, then, grand purposes for us having to wait, what may they be? Well, one of these may be that we should learn patience. How impatient we can be. Sometimes we can want everything yesterday. We can want everything done yesterday. We can want to have things now. We can want people to do things for us now. We want everything to be just so, and exactly how we want it to be. But the Lord, according to his perfect will not have it to be thus. But he will have us to learn patience, which is a godly thing. It is a thing which is worthy of God. It is a thing which is a characteristic of God. He is patient with us, and are we not thankful for this? Elsewise, there should have been no hope for any of us. God is long-suffering, as we read many times in the scriptures. He suffers much, and he suffers it long, suffers much injustice to his name, and he would have us to be the same. We should endure godly patience. We should learn this thing, and we should seek to improve this thing. And it is done sometimes by this means of holding in doubt. Also, another benefit or purpose which might be obtained by this practice, the Lord causing his people to wait for an answer, to wait for guidance, to wait for leading. Another purpose is this, that they should have cause to lean upon him the more. That they should seek for closer communion with God. Is it not so often that we can find ourselves drifting away from the things of God? We can find ourselves beginning to lose interest from time to time, lapsing in our devotions and the like. You find yourself in such a state? Yes, well, sometimes it is these occasions when we are in doubt and confusion, they drive us back to it. Or they give it new life, they give it new energy. Whereas once it was perhaps becoming a little formal and ritualistic, something done out of habit, now the spirit is put back into it. It is revived somewhat because of the fact that we are in confusion. We have begun once again to be brought to an end of ourselves, and so we must lean the more on Christ. We must forget ourselves. Ourselves are not the response. We are not the answer to problems, but God is. Our brains are not the only thing which should be called into account. They're not the first thing that should be called into account when we seek after wisdom. Our minds may be very beneficial. They may be very useful. They may provide much common sense in making decisions. Yet they are not the authority on the subject, and they should never be treated thus. That is two benefits, particularly, which are every believer's who is in such a state, who is waiting upon the Lord for guidance. And that is the best place to be. Waiting on the Lord. You do not know what you ought to be doing, where you ought to be going, or anything else. Somewhat confused, perplexed, dismayed. Wait, I say, upon the Lord. Well, secondly, consider that the Lord grants perception. The Lord gives light. He gives understanding in this dark case. Not at once. Eli has been consulted twice before already, and he has failed to see the Lord's hand in it. Samuel has come to him twice before, and he has merely been told to go and to lie back down again. I did not call you. But now, something changes. What happens? Does Eli suddenly become more intelligent? Has he been reasoning things out in his brain, and now he has come to the grand conclusion? That may have been the case, to some extent. But above all things, we must see here, the Lord made him to perceive. He perceived because the Lord had given him that light. He had given him that understanding which before he lacked. There was nothing much in Eli that changed, but rather the Lord changed the case for the good, because he made it clear to Eli what was happening. And so he was given this ability to perceive that the Lord had called the child. To perceive. It is to see clearly. It is to see, as it were, light in darkness. Sometimes it can seem as though we are just surrounded by darkness, and worse, a darkness with fog, which is just impenetrable. We cannot see forwards. We can only look backwards, perhaps, with some misery and shame. Looking forwards, all we see is a black wall facing us. But suddenly, in the case of Eli, we see here, and in the case of many who have passed on before, we see the same testimony. A light shines in the darkness. A light is shone upon that road before us, and we see further ahead. We see what awaits. We see what is to come before. We see what we must do. Light comes, perception is given. And brethren, we should pray for this. All the time we are waiting in darkness, we must pray to the Lord that he would be a light to us in our darkness. Christ, he is the light of the world. He brings the light of the gospel. And once we are saved, we are never to forget that. It's not just simply for the unbelievers to be told that Christ is the light of the world. It's for us as well. It's for everyone. Christ is not just the light for them, but he is the light for us. And it is only in him that we will find light in such a case. It is only in him that we will find guidance of this sort, whereby we will be able to see the way, when he graciously designs to reveal it to us. When it is the right time, when we have learned something of patience, when we have learned something and been forced to cast ourselves upon Christ, when the time is right, when that acceptable year has come, then at that time there will be light sufficient, and it will be glorious light. From this point onwards, we see here better things till verse 10. We see that light comes. Eli now comes to Samuel, and he now has the wisdom, he now has the light to tell him the right thing, to go to lie down again, yes, as before. But if he calls thee again, if the Lord speaks again, then thou shalt say thus, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. And he goes and he obeys. Friends, we must always pray that we might be granted this very light, this perception, that we might see what we ought to be doing, that we might hear what the Lord has to say to us, and that the Lord would reveal himself to us, that he would reveal his will to us, and teach us his way. That must be always our desire, that we should know what the Lord would be having us to do, and that he alone would show it to us. Not that we would be able to work it out, not that we could plan our own future, but the Lord would show us the way. Psalm 25 is, if you like, the first place to turn in many respects on the subject of guidance. I have not time to read it all now. I do suggest you read it later. But verses 4 and 5 particularly Show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy paths. Lead me in thy truth, and teach me. For thou art the God of my salvation. And note this especially. On thee do I wait all the day. And as you read through that psalm, you can see many principles which ought to be employed when seeking the Lord's guidance. Many things which we can learn from the psalmist that we ought to be doing. Having one's eyes ever toward the Lord, praying for the Lord to turn and to have mercy, being desolate and afflicted, praying that the Lord would bring us out of our distresses. He would look upon the affliction and pain and forgive our sins. All these things. And amongst them, in that psalm, we find glorious statements of faith by the psalmist, David. As in verse 8, good and upright is the Lord, therefore will he teach sinners in the way. The meek will he guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his way. Are we meek? These are the questions we should be asking as we read through these portions. Are we humble? Are we under the Lord's will? Have we lifted up our souls unto the Lord? Do we trust in him fully? Then we can indeed pray, as the psalmist does here, that he would have mercy upon him, that he would grant him perception and light out of his misery. Well, then we see that Eli, he is granted perception, and we see also how God gives perception to us, who sometimes sit in darkness. Thirdly, then we find that the Lord makes his people to obey. The Lord makes his people to obey, and he aligns their will to his will. These two very much linked together, these two ideas. The Lord makes his people. It is all the work of the Lord, unseen to man. To an unbeliever, it would appear oftentimes to be mere coincidence. Yet in these things we can look back. Once they are past, we can trace the Lord's hand through them. We can see how he has been working in this case and that case and that case. He's been working in this person's heart and that person. And so it has all worked together, and we can see something here of his grand plan. Even looking back over our lives, we can see how he has worked. And in so doing, we can indeed raise up a stone of Ebenezer. Hitherto hath the Lord helped us. We can consider on this matter how that the Lord will make his people do it. He guides, he causes them to sit in darkness, to train them and to increase them in holiness. He then grants to them perception, to see what needs doing, to understand. And then, after that, he causes them to do it. He puts such a fire in their heart for that thing which they must do, that they cannot but do it. They have no option. It is like an unquenchable fire of desire in their hearts to do this thing, and it cannot be put out. Their efforts go on and on. They seek to try to quench it, to silence it, to still it, to calm it down, to put it away, as we might say, to sweep it under the carpet, to forget about it. And yet it always comes back. And this is one way in which we may know it is the Lord's will. There is such a desire in our hearts. It may, of course, be false on occasions. If we are not right with the Lord, it may be pride and ambition welling up in our hearts. And yet, in some sense, in such a case, we can tell the Lord when he is guiding, when he is leading, because of the desire he puts in our hearts for the thing. How much of fire burns in our hearts that we must do it. We have such an attitude to something as Paul had to preaching. He says that he does not preach because he would, but necessity is laid upon him. Yea, he says, woe is me if I preach not the gospel. Woe to me, he says. I am damned if I preach not the gospel. And so it is with us. Sometimes when we seek the Lord's guidance, we must do it. Samuel here, he does not really want to tell Eli what he has heard from the Lord. The Lord comes to him, and Samuel answers and says, "Speak, for thy servant heareth." And then the Lord goes on to tell Samuel what he will do concerning Eli and his sons, their destruction. The fact that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever has already been foretold. In the previous chapter, we read of Eli being warned of God, but now it comes again. And this is perhaps a part of this particular account which is often missed and overlooked. Everybody focuses on the child Samuel. And many people, they like to think of Samuel, but they do not consider what message he was given. It was not a pleasant message. And we are not surprised to read in verse 15, Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. He feared to do it. And yet it was the Lord's will that he would do it. And so such a case was brought about that he did do it. He was brought to do it by the Lord. Eli is the instrument used in this case, which makes him to do it. He comes and he says to Samuel, "What is the thing which the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me." And so Samuel tells him everything. But it is not a nice message. It is not a message that Samuel would have wanted to pass on, and yet he must do it. Sometimes the message which the Lord brings to us will not be a message that we want to hear. Sometimes it will be a message which is contrary to all of our hopes, all of our ambitions, all of our desires, all that we wanted for ourselves. We would do well if we would respond as Eli did here and said, "It is the Lord, let him do what seemeth him good." It would be well if that was our response. But it is easy for us to draw back from these things, to hold back from what we ought to be doing, because it is displeasing. It is not what is tasteful. It is not what we like. It is something which we would shun if we were given the opportunity. It is never an opportunity we would take ordinarily. But the Lord makes us to do it. There we can see another case which shows something of the Lord leading. There is often a fire burning in the heart which must make you do it. There is also something to be done which goes against the grain. It is something which is not natural. It is not something which appeals to this particular person. It is something which they perhaps find hard, something which they struggle with, something they find difficult. But if the Lord is calling them to it, they will go and they will do it. They will do it and they will strive to improve upon it, to do it well, to do it as unto the Lord. We read, "Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power." So it shall be. The Lord's people will be willing when he makes them to do his will. They will do it, and they will do it cheerfully if they are his people. But oftentimes there is this period of waiting beforehand, that they may be prepared for that duty, that they may have their hearts prepared for that news which they are to receive. Perhaps it is that they are given this period of patience, that they may learn it and learn it well, that they may be driven to Christ, that they may be strong Christians, that when they receive the news, it does not break them. When they are told what they must do, it does not cast them down. It does not cause them to cease from following Christ, but it means that they are ready for it. They are strong. They are ready and they are close to the Lord. Though it may be a setback, yet they will continue. The Lord works all things well. Christ does all things well. Brethren, we must rest upon this. We must rest upon this assurance that God cannot fail to keep any of his promises. He cannot fail to show us the way. And we must wait upon the Lord and his good time. Well, may the Lord bless these things to us then, and may he have all of the glory and the praise. Amen.